one of those longer videos. It has a lot of different parts to it. So similarly to 1.3, I will try my best to get through it. There is a lot for you guys to memorize and remember from this section, so please take good notes because you will refer back to them often. Okay, so in 1.4 here, the main topic is we're looking at the properties of real numbers. So the properties of real numbers are really the different rules that apply to the operations when working with real numbers. So the first one we have here is the commutative property. The commutative property is the order in which we add or multiply numbers. And really, the order doesn't matter. So we can do this in any order. But this is only with addition and multiplication. So if we have A times B, we could also take B times A and get the same result. Similarly, with A plus B, we could take B plus A and get the same result there as well. The second property we're looking at is the associative property. The associative property says that if we move, the moving of grouping symbols does not affect your answer. This is only with addition and multiplication once again. So if I have A plus B in parentheses plus C, I would get the same result if I moved my parentheses to be A plus parentheses B plus C. The order that you add or multiply does not matter. Similarly with the next one, if I did the same thing, A times B times C, I would get the same result no matter where my parentheses are. All right, the next property that we have is the identity property. We have an identity property of addition and multiplication. They are a little different for both. So the identity property of addition says that the sum of any real number and 0 is the original number. So if I took any number, A plus 0, I'm just going to get A. With real numbers, that would be like taking 2 plus 0, which is just going to give you 2. Similarly, but a little different, with multiplication, the product of any real number and 1, oops, did not mean to do that, is the original number. So if I took A times 1, I'm just going to get A. That would be the same as if I took 2 times 1, it's just going to give me 2. The next one is only a multiplication property. The 0 property of multiplication says that the product of a number and 0 is 0. So remember, if I took any number times 0, I'm going to get 0 as my answer. Once again, 2 times 0 is just going to give me 0. All right, so I know I went through those front properties really quickly. Please make sure you guys pause the video if I move too quick. Write down all of the information. We will be quizzing and testing on this at some point throughout the year, so make sure you are taking the time to memorize it now. All right, a couple more properties here. We have the multiplication property of -1, which tells us the product of -1 and any number is negative. Well, actually, I should say of any positive number is negative. If you multiply -1 by a negative number, you will get a positive. So really what to think about with the multiplication property of -1 is it just flips the sign. So if I took -1 times b, positive b, it's going to give me negative b. All right, the next property, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with a lot of these, is the distributive property. Some people call this the monkey arms property. Okay, so why it's called the monkey arms property is you distribute whatever number is outside the parentheses to the two numbers that are inside the parentheses. So in this example, 3 is on the outside of the parentheses. So I'm going to use my monkey arms to distribute 3 to both of my elements that are, or my terms that are inside my parentheses. So I will take 3 times 2x. Remember, you just multiply the number out in front of the variable. So 3 times 2 gives me 6x. And then I've got 3 times -4. 3 times -4 is -12. And that's how my distributive property works. Okay, we'll do the next example as well. Actually, we'll skip one to do a negative example. We'll do the other two in class. So I have -6 times my parentheses. So I'm going to use my distributive property to multiply in my -6. I've got -6 times -3. Negative times negative gives me a positive. So that will be 18x. And then I've got -6 times +7, which is -42. Okay, another thing to keep in mind is with our fractions, if we are dividing multiple terms in our numerator by a single denominator, we can split our fraction into two parts. So I could take 3 divided by, 9x divided by 3 and -3 divided by 9x. So splitting this up, I would have 9x over 3 plus -3 over 3. I think it's easiest to keep the sign between your terms with the term in the numerator and then just add the two fractions together. So 9x divided by 3, I'm just going to divide my number out in front. So 9 divided by 3 gives me 3x. And then -3 divided by 3 is going to give me -1. Some of you may write this as 3x plus -1. That would be fine as well. So in this section, please try those other 3 examples on your own. We will be going over them in class together. All right, next we have the inverse property. So the inverse property, think about inverse as kind of undoing. So for the inverse property of addition, if I have a positive number, which is a in this case, if I was to multiply this by -a, I would get 0. Think about this as 2 plus -2, which would give you 0. For the inverse property of multiplication, you are multiplying by the reciprocal. The reciprocal is when you turn, pretty much if you have a number in the numerator, you turn it into a fraction. And if you have a number in the denominator, you would turn it into a numerator. So if I have a times its reciprocal, which would be 1 over a, that would equal 1. If we were to work with numbers, I could have 2 times its reciprocal, which is 1/2, which would just give you 1. So the next thing we define here is the reciprocal. The term you'll see all the time is multiplying by the reciprocal. Remember, that's just essentially where you flip your fraction. So if I have a over b, my reciprocal would be b over a. When you multiply by the reciprocal, you get 1 as your result. So 3 is a whole number, but that could be represented as the fraction 3 over 1. The reciprocal for 3 over 1 is 1/3. 3 times 1/3 will give you 1. All right, so that's just a little bit about the inverse property. That one is commonly one of the more confusing properties for students. Next, we have some more definitions. These are important that you guys know for the rest of the school year. So a term is your variables or constants, which we'll talk about later, or a combination of the two put together. Terms are separated by your operation symbols, which right now we're just working with our addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, or this could also be an equal sign. Like terms are terms that have, this blank should not be there, the same variable to the same degree. Okay, we're going to talk about degree later. Degree is just the exponent that is on your term. So a quick example of this would be if I have 2x plus 4x, I could add 2 and 4 together with x. If I had, so that would work. If I had 2x plus 4x squared, I could not add those two together because my variables have different degrees. I have a first degree variable, which is 2x, and a second degree variable, which is x squared. We're going to talk way more about degrees later. It's just important that you guys know how to add like terms. We're going to talk about that more down the road as well. A constant is any term with no variable. So, those are just your numbers. 4, 7, 1001. Doesn't matter, right? It is just a number with no variable. It does not change. All right. The final section here. We have our last term or vocab term for this lesson, which is coefficient. A coefficient is a number that is multiplied by a variable. Think about that as like if we have 3x or 8x to the 5th power, your coefficient is just that number that is out in front. So in this case, it would be 3, and in that case, it would be 8. All right, so that is everything new for this video. I know it kind of drug on, and there's a lot for you guys to write down and memorize. Okay, this last set of questions on the back are just more order of operations, distributive property, simplifying, things that we talked about within this video as properties of real numbers. Please write all of them down, try them out on your own, but we will plan on going through all of them together in class. All right, thanks for watching. Please bring any questions that you have.